On Christmas Eve, a 6-month pregnant woman stood on a fifth-floor balcony arguing with her billionaire husband about his mistress wearing diamonds meant for her. 30 seconds later, she was falling through the air, 5 stories down, her life flashing before her eyes. She should have died instantly on the pavement, but she didn't. She landed on the one car in all of Manhattan that could save her life. And that car, it belonged to the man her husband hated most, her billionaire ex-fiancé who never stopped loving her. Now here's where it gets insane. Her husband tried to delete the security footage. His mother tried to steal her baby before it was even born. Her own mother sold her out for $500,000. And when she thought she'd finally won, he came back to finish what he started. With a stolen uniform, a lethal syringe, and nothing left to lose. 3 attempted murders, 2 false victories, and a revenge so sweet it will restore your faith in karma. This is the story of how one woman fell 5 stories and rose higher than she ever imagined. Before we dive into this wild ride, do me a favor. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances. Drop a comment telling me what time it is where you're listening, because this story is about to keep you up way past your bedtime. And if you want more real-life drama that'll make your jaws drop, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Trust me, this one's worth every single minute. Now let's begin where all great falls start, with a perfect lie. On Christmas Eve, a 6-month pregnant woman was pushed off a 5th-floor balcony by her billionaire husband. She should have died instantly, but she landed on the one car that could save her, and that car belonged to the man her husband hated most, her billionaire ex who never stopped loving her. What happens next? 3 attempted cover-ups, 2 victories that turned into nightmares, and a revenge so sweet it will make you believe in karma again. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us what time it is where you are listening and whether you have ever spotted red flags you ignored. Because tonight's story, it is a masterclass in why we should always trust our gut. Madison Claire Hart stood in front of the floor-length mirror in her bedroom, adjusting the emerald green maternity gown that cost $5,000, but somehow made her feel worth 5. She was 28 years old, 6 months pregnant, and married to one of Manhattan's most successful real estate billionaires. From the outside, her life looked perfect. Picture-perfect social media posts, designer maternity clothes, a penthouse that belonged in architectural magazines. But Madison knew the truth that hid behind the perfectly staged photographs. She knew what happened when the cameras turned off and the guests went home. She knew the sound Marcus's voice made when he was 3 drinks past charming and 2 drinks into cruel. Tonight was the annual Blackwell Christmas Gala. 150 guests, an orchestra, champagne fountains, and Madison playing the role she had perfected over 3 years of marriage. The grateful wife, the glowing mother-to-be, the woman who had everything, except her freedom, except her dignity, except the man she actually loved. Madison touched her belly gently, feeling her daughter kick. That was the only real thing in her life anymore. This baby, this little girl who deserved so much better than the family she was being born into. 3 years ago, Madison had been a successful event planner with her own growing business. She had been engaged to Cameron Ethan Sterling, a brilliant tech entrepreneur who made her laugh until her stomach hurt and who looked at her like she hung the moon. They were planning a small wedding, something intimate and real. Then her father's real estate company started collapsing. He had made bad investments, taken loans from the wrong people, and suddenly the Hart family empire was crumbling. That is when Marcus Thorne Blackwell appeared with an offer. He would save her father's company, absorb the debt, and turn everything around. All he wanted in return was Madison. Not her love, not her heart, just her name, her presence, her complete and total cooperation in becoming Mrs. Marcus Blackwell. Madison's father had begged her. Her mother had cried. They had 1 month to accept Marcus's offer or lose everything. Their home, their reputation, everything the Hart family had built over 3 generations. So Madison had broken her engagement to Cameron. She had told him it was her choice, that she realized she did not love him the way he deserved. She had watched his heartbreak in real time and forced herself not to take it back. She married Marcus 6 weeks later in a ceremony that cost $500,000 and felt like a funeral. For the first year, Marcus had been almost tolerable, cold but polite, distant but not cruel. He traveled constantly for business. Madison had convinced herself she could survive this. It was just a transaction, a business arrangement with a wedding certificate. Then Marcus started drinking more, staying home more, watching her more, criticizing everything she did, the way she dressed, the way she spoke to his colleagues, the way she smiled too much or not enough. He fired her assistant and told her she did not need to work anymore. He gradually cut her off from her friends, claiming they were bad influences or social climbers. By year 2, Madison barely recognized herself. She had become a ghost in her own life. She moved through the penthouse like a shadow, trying to anticipate Marcus's moods, trying to avoid triggering his anger. Then she got pregnant. And for one brief moment, she thought maybe this would change things. Maybe a baby would soften him. Maybe becoming a father would bring out some hidden kindness. Instead, Marcus grew worse. He accused her of trapping him, of getting pregnant on purpose to secure her position. He started going out more, coming home late, smelling like expensive perfume that was not hers. 6 weeks ago, Madison had seen Marcus having lunch with a woman named Vanessa Catherine Reed, a beautiful, ambitious woman who worked in his company's marketing department. They were sitting close, too close. Vanessa was laughing at something Marcus said, touching his arm, leaning in like she had every right to be in that space. When Madison asked about it, Marcus had exploded. He accused her of spying on him, of being paranoid and unstable. He told her pregnancy hormones were making her crazy. He said if she ever embarrassed him by questioning his relationships again, she would regret it. That night, Madison had locked herself in the bathroom and cried until she had no tears left. She had looked at her reflection and barely recognized the woman staring back. Where was the confident event planner who had built her own business? Where was the woman who used to laugh freely and dream big? Where was the Madison who had been brave enough to love Cameron Sterling with her whole heart? She was gone, erased, replaced by this hollow version who flinched at sudden movements and apologized for existing. But tonight, something inside Madison had shifted. Maybe it was the baby kicking stronger every day. Maybe it was exhaustion from pretending. Maybe it was just the final straw after 3 years of slow suffocation. Whatever it was, Madison felt something she had not felt in a long time. Anger, not the hot, explosive kind, the cold, clarifying kind, the kind that made her see her situation with brutal honesty. Marcus did not love her. He had never loved her. She was a trophy, a possession, something he could control and display when it suited him. And tonight at this Christmas gala, she was going to have to smile and pretend everything was perfect, while Vanessa would probably be there wearing the necklace Madison had seen her with last week. The necklace Marcus had claimed he returned because Madison said it was too expensive. Madison took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. She placed both hands on her belly and whispered to her daughter, "I'm going to get us out of this," she promised. "I do not know how yet, but I am going to find a way. You deserve better than this. We both do." She did not know that in 3 hours she would be fighting for both their lives. She did not know that the man she married was capable of something far worse than emotional cruelty. And she did not know that the worst night of her life would also become the night everything finally changed. Madison took one last look in the mirror, put on her fakest smile, and walked out to join the party. The penthouse glittered like something out of a fairy tale. White lights wrapped around every column. A massive Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with ornaments that probably cost more than most people's cars. Servers in crisp uniforms moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and elaborate hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played classical Christmas music near the windows that overlooked Manhattan's skyline. Madison descended the spiral staircase carefully, one hand on the railing, one hand supporting her belly. Several guests looked up and smiled. She had perfected the art of looking serene and graceful even when she felt like she was drowning. Marcus stood near the bar, surrounded by a group of investors. He was wearing a custom Tom Ford tuxedo and his most charming smile. When he saw Madison, his eyes flickered with something cold before he arranged his face into pleasant approval. He excused himself from his group and crossed to her, taking her elbow in a grip that looked gentle but felt like a warning. "There you are," he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "You look beautiful, darling." "Thank you," Madison replied automatically. "The party looks wonderful." "Try to mingle," he murmured in her ear, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet tone. Smile more. You look miserable. Do not embarrass me tonight. Before she could respond, he released her and returned to his investors, laughing at someone's joke like he had not just delivered a threat disguised as concern. Madison moved through the party on autopilot. She smiled at Marcus's colleagues. She accepted compliments on her dress and her glowing pregnancy. She made small talk about nursery themes and baby names, all while feeling like a puppet on strings. Then she saw her. Vanessa Catherine Reed stood near the piano wearing a stunning red dress and the diamond necklace, the one Marcus had sworn he returned. She was talking to several board members, laughing that practiced laugh that was just loud enough to draw attention without seeming try-hard. When Vanessa's eyes met Madison's across the room, something passed between them. Vanessa's smile widened just slightly, a smile that said, I know something you do not. A smile that said, I have already won. Madison felt heat flood her face. Her hands trembled. For 3 years, she had swallowed her pride and accepted humiliation after humiliation. But this woman wearing Marcus's gifts at Madison's own Christmas party, flaunting an affair in front of 150 guests, something inside Madison snapped. She crossed the room toward Vanessa, her heart pounding. Several guests stepped aside, perhaps sensing the tension in her movements. Vanessa, Madison said pleasantly, that is a beautiful necklace. Is it new? Vanessa touched the diamonds with a satisfied smile. Oh, this? Yes, it is a Christmas gift from someone very generous. Madison kept her voice steady. It looks exactly like one I saw a few weeks ago at Cartier, the one Marcus was looking at. Vanessa's smile sharpened. What a coincidence. Great minds think alike, I suppose. Before Madison could respond, Marcus appeared between them. His hand clamped on Madison's arm, his fingers digging in painfully. Madison, he said with forced cheerfulness, I need your opinion on the catering for next week. Excuse us, Vanessa. He steered Madison away from the crowd, his grip bruising. When they reached the hallway near the study, he spun her around, his face twisted with rage. What the hell do you think you are doing? He hissed. I was just admiring her necklace, Madison said, her own anger rising to meet his. The one you told me you returned. You are making a scene. I am making a scene. She is wearing your gifts at our party, Marcus. She is flaunting your affair in front of everyone we know. Marcus laughed, a harsh sound. Affair? You are paranoid. Vanessa is a colleague. That necklace could be from anyone. It is from Cartier. Same designer, same style as the one you were going to buy me before you said it was too expensive. Keep your voice down, he growled, glancing back toward the party. You are embarrassing yourself. This is exactly why I cannot trust you around my associates. You are unstable. I am not unstable, Madison shot back, her voice shaking. I am finally paying attention. I have spent 3 years making excuses for you, believing your lies. But I am done. You are done? Marcus stepped closer, and Madison caught the strong scent of whiskey on his breath. You do not get to be done. You are my wife. You are carrying my child. You belong to me. I do not belong to anyone, Madison said, and even she was surprised by the steel in her voice, especially not to someone who treats me like property. Marcus's face flushed dark red, his jaw clenched. Madison saw his hands curl into fists and felt genuine fear spike through her chest. Before he could respond, one of his business partners called out from the main room, Marcus, we need you for a toast. Marcus took a deep breath, forcibly smoothing his expression. This conversation is not over, he said quietly. Stay out of sight for the rest of the night. Go to the balcony, the guest room, I do not care. Just stay away from my guests until you can control yourself. He turned and walked back to the party, his charm sliding back into place like a mask. Madison stood in the hallway, shaking. Her arm throbbed where he had grabbed her. Her heart raced. She felt tears threatening and forced them back. She could not stay at this party, could not smile and pretend anymore, not tonight. Madison made her way to the balcony door, the one that opened from the dining area. She needed air, real air, space to breathe and think. The balcony wrapped around this side of the building 5 floors above the Manhattan streets. Glass railings provided a clear view of the city lights in the gentle snow that had begun to fall. Madison stepped outside and let the cold air hit her face. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, trying to calm her racing heart. For her baby's sake, she needed to stay calm. You know that moment when you realize you have been living someone else's life? Madison thought to herself. When you wake up and do not recognize the person you have become? That moment when you understand that you have traded everything you are for the illusion of security? I kept telling myself I was imagining things, she whispered to the empty night. That Marcus did not mean those cutting remarks. That isolation was just adjusting to married life. But if you are reading this situation in your own life, when someone makes you doubt your reality, when you are losing yourself piece by piece, that is not love. That is control. Madison opened her eyes and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Cameron was probably at his own Christmas party, happy, moving on, living the life they could have had together. She had made the biggest mistake of her life when she agreed to marry Marcus. And now she was trapped with a baby coming in 3 months. Behind her, the balcony door opened. Madison turned, expecting to see a party guest who had wandered out for air. Instead, Marcus stepped onto the balcony, alone. His face was flushed from alcohol and anger. He let the door close behind him with a heavy click. Claire, his voice cut through the cold night air. Madison felt ice flood her veins. They were alone, 5 stories up. And Marcus looked more furious than she had ever seen him. Marcus, she said carefully, please, let us talk about this inside. But Marcus was already moving toward her, and Madison realized with horrifying clarity that talking was the last thing on his mind. Madison backed up instinctively as Marcus stalked toward her. Her back hit the cold glass railing. Snow swirled around them, catching the light from the penthouse and creating an almost dreamlike glow. But there was nothing dreamlike about the expression on Marcus's face. Why are you out here? He demanded. I told you to stay out of sight. I just needed air, Madison said, keeping her voice calm despite her pounding heart. It is loud inside. I will go back in now. She tried to move past him, but Marcus blocked her path. His breath came in visible puffs in the cold air, heavy with whiskey. You humiliated me, he said quietly. That dangerous quiet that Madison had learned to fear more than his yelling. In front of investors, in front of colleagues, you questioned me about Vanessa like I am some cheating husband. You are a cheating husband, Madison said, the words escaping before she could stop them. She is wearing your gifts, Marcus. Everyone can see it. His hand shot out and grabbed her arm, fingers digging into the same bruise he had made earlier. Madison gasped in pain. You always have an excuse, he hissed, always playing the victim. Do you know how many reporters are in that room? Do you know what they think when they see you acting unstable? I am not acting unstable, Madison said, trying to pull her arm free. You are hurting me. I am hurting you. His voice rose. You are ruining my reputation. You are making me look like the villain when all I have done is give you everything. This penthouse, those clothes, that baby. That baby is ours, Madison said, her own anger rising. She is not a thing you gave me. She is leverage, Marcus snapped. She is the mistake that trapped us both. The words hit Madison like a physical blow. She stared at her husband, seeing him clearly for the first time. This man had never wanted a family. He had wanted control. He had wanted a beautiful, compliant wife to complete his image. And now that she was pushing back, now that she was questioning him, he could not tolerate it. Let go of me, Madison said firmly. We can talk about this tomorrow when you are sober. I am perfectly sober, Marcus said, though his words slurred slightly. And we are going to talk about this now. You are going to learn your place. He stepped closer, forcing Madison against the railing. The glass was icy cold against her back. Her heart hammered so hard she felt dizzy. Marcus, please, she said, placing her hands on her belly protectively. Please think about the baby. You are scaring me. Good, he said coldly. Maybe you should be scared. Maybe you should remember who you are dealing with. I want a divorce, Madison whispered. The words came out before she could stop them, but once they were out, she felt a strange sense of relief. I want out of this marriage. Marcus laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. A divorce? You think you get to leave me? You think you get to take my child and my money and walk away? I do not want your money, Madison said. I just want my freedom. You do not get freedom, Marcus snarled. You agreed to this. You signed a contract. You are mine until I decide otherwise. I am not property, Madison said, her voice shaking but firm. I am a person, and I am done being treated like I am worthless. Something in Marcus's face changed. The anger crystallized into something colder, more final. He looked at her like she was an obstacle to be removed rather than a person to be reasoned with. You always make me the villain, he said quietly. Maybe you should stop acting like the victim. Before Madison could process what was happening, Marcus grabbed both her arms and shoved. Hard. Madison's feet slipped on the snow-covered balcony floor. Her center of gravity shifted backward. She threw her hands out, desperately trying to grab something. Anything. Her fingers brushed Marcus's jacket but found no grip. For one frozen moment, the world slowed down. She saw Marcus's face, shocked and angry, and somehow satisfied all at once. She saw the warm glow of the penthouse behind him, the Christmas tree twinkling through the glass doors. She saw the snow swirling around them like shattered stars. Then gravity took her. Madison fell backward off the fifth-floor balcony. Her scream tore through the frozen night. The wind rushed past her face. The building blurred. The ground rushed up to meet her. She instinctively curled her body around her belly, trying to protect her daughter even as terror flooded every cell. This is it, she thought with crystal clarity. I am going to die. My baby is going to die. Marcus won. She hit something hard with a devastating impact. Metal crunched. Glass shattered. Pain exploded through her entire body. The world went white, then gray, then black. But she did not hit the pavement. 5 floors above, Marcus stood at the railing staring down in horror at what he had done. Inside the penthouse, the Christmas music continued to play. Guests laughed and clinked champagne glasses, completely unaware that a woman had just fallen from the balcony. Then someone screamed. A woman who had stepped onto a lower balcony for a cigarette had seen Madison fall. Her shriek cut through the festive atmosphere like a knife. "Oh my God," she screamed. "Someone fell! A woman fell from the building!" The party erupted into chaos. Guests rushed to the windows and balconies. Someone called 911 while several people pushed outside to look down at the street below. Marcus stumbled back from the railing, his face draining of color. What had he done? He had pushed her. He had actually pushed his pregnant wife off a 5th-story balcony. Panic clawed at his throat. He ran back inside, his mind racing. He needed a story. He needed to control this. He needed to make sure no one knew the truth. She slipped, he said loudly to the nearest group of guests. The snow on the balcony. She must have slipped. I told her to come inside. But down on the street, something impossible had happened. Madison had not hit the pavement. She had landed on the hood of a sleek black Tesla parked directly below the balcony. The car's hood crumpled under the impact, absorbing enough of the force to prevent instant death. The vehicle's sensors immediately detected the collision and sent an alert to its owner. An alert that appeared on Cameron Ethan Sterling's phone with a jarring buzz. Cameron was at his own Christmas party across town when his phone lit up with the emergency notification. Vehicle impact detected at Blackwell Tower. Severe damage. Emergency services alerted. His blood ran cold. His car was parked at Blackwell Tower because he had been meeting with a business associate in the building that afternoon. He had intended to pick it up tomorrow. But why would there be an impact? A collision in a parking area? Cameron excused himself and called the security company monitoring his vehicle. The footage they sent him made his heart stop. A woman, falling from above, hitting his car, lying motionlessly on the crushed hood. Even from the grainy footage, even from that angle, Cameron recognized her. Madison. He was running for the door before conscious thought kicked in. His driver barely had time to react as Cameron barked orders. Blackwell Tower, now. As fast as you can, sir, it is across town. Christmas traffic, I do not care if you have to drive on the sidewalk, get me there now. As the car wove through Manhattan traffic, Cameron's mind reeled. Madison was hurt. Madison had fallen. Madison had landed on his car. The one thing that could have possibly saved her from certain death on the pavement. Coincidence? Fate? He did not care. All that mattered was getting to her. The drive took 12 minutes that felt like 12 hours. When they screeched to a stop outside Blackwell Tower, an ambulance was already there. Paramedics surrounding the crumpled Tesla. Cameron leaped from the car and ran toward them. He had to push through a crowd of onlookers and shocked party guests who had come down from the penthouse. "That is my car," Cameron said urgently to a police officer trying to hold back the crowd. "The woman who fell, I need to see if she is alive. Sir, you need to step back." "I am Cameron Sterling," he said, his voice breaking. "That woman is Madison Hart. She was. Please just tell me if she is alive." The officer's expression softened slightly. He spoke into his radio, then nodded. "The paramedics say she has a pulse. They are stabilizing her now." "Are you family?" Cameron hesitated for only a second. "Yes, I am her emergency contact." It was a lie, but he did not care. He would tell 1,000 lies if it meant he could make sure Madison was okay. One of the paramedics looked up and saw Cameron. Recognition flashed across her face. "Mr. Sterling, this is your vehicle?" "Yes. Please, how is she?" "She is alive," the paramedic said. "Barely. She has severe injuries, possible internal bleeding. But the car absorbed enough impact that she survived the fall. Sir, she is 6 months pregnant. We need to get her to Mercy General immediately." "Then go," Cameron said. "I am coming with you." The paramedic started to protest, but something in Cameron's expression stopped her. She nodded. As they loaded Madison into the ambulance, Cameron caught a glimpse of her face. Pale, bruised, blood matting her hair. But alive. She was alive. The ambulance doors closed and they sped toward the hospital, sirens wailing. Cameron held Madison's hand gently, carefully, like she might shatter if he gripped too hard. "I am here," he whispered, though she could not hear him. "I am right here, Madison. You are going to be okay. You and your baby are going to be okay." But even as he said the words, he knew the night was far from over. Because 5 floors above them, Marcus was already constructing his lies, already threatening witnesses, already trying to bury the truth. And Cameron was going to make sure he failed. The emergency room at Mercy General Hospital exploded with controlled chaos the moment the ambulance arrived. Doctors and nurses swarmed around Madison's stretcher, shouting medical terminology that Cameron could not fully process. He stayed close, refusing to be pushed aside, watching as they wheeled her through double doors marked trauma. A nurse finally blocked his path gently. "Sir, you cannot go beyond this point. Let the doctors work. Are you her husband?" Cameron's jaw clenched. "No. But I am the person who cares whether she lives or dies, which is more than I can say for her actual husband." The nurse studied his face, saw the desperation there, and softened. "Wait in the family room. Someone will update you as soon as we know more." Cameron paced the small waiting room for 30 agonizing minutes before a doctor emerged, still in blood-stained scrubs. Cameron's heart dropped. "She is alive," the doctor said immediately, seeing Cameron's expression. "But barely. She suffered severe trauma from the fall. 3 broken ribs, a fractured wrist, significant bruising, and a concussion. We are monitoring her closely." "And the baby?" Cameron forced himself to ask. The doctor's face grew grimmer. "That is where things get complicated. The impact caused something called placental abruption. The placenta has partially separated from the uterine wall. Right now, the baby's heartbeat is stable, but the next 48 hours are critical. If Mrs. Blackwell moves too much, if her blood pressure spikes, if the abruption worsens, we could lose the baby. She needs complete bed rest." Cameron felt like someone had punched him in the chest. "Can I see her?" "She's unconscious right now. We have her sedated to keep her calm. But yes, you can sit with her, just for a little while." The doctor led Cameron to a private room where Madison lay surrounded by machines. Monitors beeped steadily, tracking her heartbeat and the baby's. Madison's face was pale beneath the bruises, her hair spread across the pillow. An IV ran into her arm. Bandages covered various cuts and scrapes. Cameron pulled a chair close to her bed and took her hand carefully, mindful of the IV. She looked so fragile, so different from the confident, laughing woman he had fallen in love with 4 years ago. "I am here," he whispered. "I am not going anywhere, Madison. You are safe now." As if she could hear him, Madison's eyelids fluttered. Her fingers twitched in his hand. Cameron leaned closer. "Madison, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused and confused. She blinked several times, trying to orient herself. When her gaze finally landed on Cameron, tears immediately filled her eyes. Cameron, she whispered, her voice rough and painful. You are real. This is real. I am real, he said, squeezing her hand gently. You are in the hospital. You fell, but you are alive. You and your baby are alive. Madison closed her eyes as tears slipped down her temples. He pushed me, she whispered. Marcus pushed me off the balcony. Cameron felt rage surge through him. Hot and fierce, I know. I believe you. And we are going to make sure everyone else knows it too. My baby, Madison said, her hand moving to her belly. Is my baby okay? The doctors say she is strong, but you need to stay very still for the next 2 days. No stress, no movement. Can you do that? Madison nodded weakly. I will do anything. Anything to keep her safe. A nurse entered to check Madison's vitals. She smiled kindly at them both. Your wife is very lucky, she said to Cameron. Falling 5 stories? Most people do not survive that. Cameron did not correct her assumption. Let her think they were married. It would make it easier for him to stay close. After the nurse left, Madison's eyes found Cameron's again. Why were you there? She asked. Why was your car under that balcony? Cameron shook his head. I do not know. I had a meeting in the building earlier. I parked there and planned to pick it up tomorrow. But Madison, listen to me. The fact that you landed on my car instead of the pavement, that car saved your life. The Tesla's design, the way it crumpled, it absorbed enough impact that you survived. So I literally fell for you again, Madison whispered. And despite everything, a tiny smile tugged at her lips. That is the worst meet cute ever. Cameron felt his own tears threatening. He laughed shakily. Your sense of humor survived a 5-story fall. That is my girl. I am not your girl anymore, Madison said sadly. I gave up that right 3 years ago. You never gave up anything, Cameron said firmly. You were forced into an impossible choice. But Madison, I need to tell you something. When someone shows you violence once, believe them. Do not wait for the second time. Do not let anyone tell you that you are overreacting or that it was a one-time thing. Violence is never one time. It is a pattern that escalates. Madison nodded, fresh tears flowing. I should have left him months ago. I should have found a way. You are leaving him now, Cameron said. I already called my lawyer. We are filing for divorce in a restraining order first thing tomorrow. We are getting you out of this marriage safely. What if he comes here? Madison asked, fear sharp in her voice. I have security posted outside your door, Cameron said. He will not get near you. And the police will want to interview you when you are strong enough. Madison, you woke up in the ambulance. You told the paramedics that Marcus pushed you. That is on record now. Good, Madison whispered. Her eyes were starting to close again, exhaustion and medication pulling her under. Good. I want everyone to know what he did. Sleep, Cameron said softly. I will be right here when you wake up. Over the next 24 hours, Madison's condition slowly stabilized. The baby's heartbeat remained strong. The bleeding stopped. The doctors began to express cautious optimism. Cameron never left. He slept in the uncomfortable chair beside her bed, ate terrible hospital cafeteria food, and refused to go home even when Madison insisted he should get rest. The police came to interview Madison. She told them everything. The history of emotional abuse, the affair with Vanessa, the confrontation on the balcony, the push. She told them clearly and calmly, and Cameron held her hand the entire time. We have several witnesses from the party, the lead detective said. Some of them reported hearing you and Mr. Blackwell arguing. We also have security footage from the building. Marcus tried to delete it, Madison said. The detective smiled grimly. He tried, but our tech team recovered it. Mrs. Blackwell, based on your statement and the evidence we have gathered, we are arresting Marcus Blackwell for attempted murder and attempted murder of an unborn child. Madison felt relief flood through her so powerfully she started crying. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. After the police left, Cameron pulled his chair close again. See, he said gently. Justice is coming. It is going to be okay. Is it? Madison asked. Cameron, even if Marcus goes to jail, I have nothing. No money of my own, no home, no job. I gave up everything to marry him. You can stay with me, Cameron said immediately. Not as anything romantic. Not unless you want that someday. But Madison, I have a guest room. I have resources. You can stay as long as you need while you figure things out. Madison looked at him with such gratitude it made Cameron's chest ache. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "After what I did to you 3 years ago?" "Because I never stopped caring about you," Cameron said simply. "And because the woman I fell in love with is still in there somewhere, I can see her fighting her way back." "I am scared," Madison whispered. "Scared of what comes next. Scared of being alone. Scared I will not be a good mother after everything that has happened." "You are already a good mother," Cameron said firmly. "You protected your daughter with your own body when you fell. You survived for her. That is what good mothers do." Madison squeezed his hand. "Maybe," she said slowly, "maybe things are going to be okay. Maybe surviving that fall was a sign. Maybe it is finally over." Cameron wanted to believe that. He wanted Madison to have peace, but he had a nagging feeling in his gut that Marcus Blackwell was not going to go down without a fight. That nagging feeling proved correct 36 hours later when a woman in an expensive suit walked into Madison's hospital room carrying legal documents. "Madison Hart Blackwell?" the woman asked crisply. "Yes," Madison said uncertainly, sitting up in her hospital bed. "I am representing Victoria Blackwell, Marcus Blackwell's mother. She has posted $5 million bail for her son. He has been released pending trial." Madison felt her blood turn to ice. "Released? But they said attempted murder charges." "The charges stand," the woman interrupted. "But Mr. Blackwell has strong ties to the community, no prior record, and substantial financial resources. The judge granted bail with conditions. He is not allowed within 500 feet of you." The woman set the legal documents on Madison's bed table. "These are custody papers, Mrs. Victoria Blackwell is seeking emergency custody of your unborn child upon birth. She contends that you are mentally unstable and a danger to yourself and the baby, that your fall was a suicide attempt, and that the Blackwell family can provide a safer, more stable environment." Madison could not breathe. The room spun. Cameron stood up so fast his chair fell over. "Get out," he said dangerously. "Get out now before I have security or remove you." The woman turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, one more thing. We have statements from 12-party guests saying they saw Mrs. Blackwell acting erratically all evening. And we have a statement from her own mother saying Madison has struggled with depression and instability for years." "You are lying," Madison gasped. The woman smiled coldly. "We will see what the court believes. Good day." After she left, Madison turned to Cameron, her eyes wild with panic. "They are going to take my baby. Cameron, they are going to take my daughter before I even get to hold her." "No," Cameron said firmly, taking her hands. "No, they are not. We are going to fight this. I am calling my lawyer right now." But even as Cameron tried to reassure her, Madison could feel her world crumbling again. She had survived the fall. She had survived Marcus's murder attempt. And now his family was going to destroy her anyway. The victory had been false. The safety had been an illusion. And Madison realized with horrifying clarity that the nightmare was far from over. Cameron's lawyer, a sharp woman named Rebecca Morrison, arrived at the hospital within 2 hours. She spread the custody documents across Madison's bed table and studied them with growing concern. "This is aggressive," Rebecca said bluntly. "The Blackwell family is not playing around. They have money, connections, and apparently no shame. Can they really take my baby?" Madison asked, her voice shaking. Rebecca looked at her seriously. "In a normal situation? No, a mother's rights are strongly protected. But they are building a narrative that you are unstable, that the fall was a suicide attempt, that you are a danger to your child." "But that is insane," Cameron said. Marcus pushed her. "We have witnesses. We have her statement. We also have 12 witnesses who have now changed their stories," Rebecca countered. "People who were at that party and initially told police they saw an argument. Now they are saying Madison seemed erratic, drunk, unstable. Someone got to them?" "Marcus," Madison whispered. "He is threatening them, paying them. Something." "Probably," Rebecca agreed. "And then there is this." She pulled out another document. "Your mother signed an affidavit stating that you have struggled with depression and suicidal thoughts since childhood, that you have always been emotionally unstable." Madison felt like she had been slapped. "My mother signed that?" Rebecca nodded grimly. "I am sorry, Madison." I know this must be devastating. Madison's hands trembled as she reached for her phone. She dialed her mother's number with shaking fingers. The phone rang 4 times before Eleanor Hart answered. Madison, sweetheart, her mother's voice came through, artificially sweet. How are you feeling? How am I feeling? Madison repeated, her voice rising. How am I feeling? Mother, you signed a legal document saying I am mentally unstable. You are helping Marcus try to take my baby. There was a long pause. Madison, you have to understand. The Blackwells came to me. They showed me the custody petition. They said if I did not cooperate, they would destroy our family completely. Your father's business, our reputation, everything. So you sold me out, Madison said, tears streaming down her face. Again, you sold me to Marcus 3 years ago, and now you are helping him take my daughter. It is not like that, Eleanor protested weakly. I am doing what is best for everyone. The Blackwells can give that baby a stable home. They have resources. You are in a hospital bed, Madison. You do not even have a place to live. I am in a hospital bed because my husband tried to murder me, Madison shouted. How can you not see that? People are saying you fell, Eleanor said, that it was an accident, or that you jumped. Madison, I have always worried about your mental health. Remember when you were 17 and you broke down after your college applications? You have always been fragile. I was stressed, Madison said. I was not suicidal. Mother, please, please do not do this to me. They paid me $500,000, Eleanor said suddenly, her voice cold. For the affidavit and for agreeing to testify if this goes to court. That money saves your father's business. So yes, Madison. I signed the papers, and I would do it again. Madison felt something inside her shatter completely. She hung up without another word and dropped the phone on the bed. She sold me, Madison whispered to Cameron and Rebecca. My own mother sold me for $500,000. Cameron pulled Madison into a careful hug, mindful of her injuries. I am so sorry, he said against her hair. I am so sorry. You can fight this, Rebecca said gently. We can show that your mother has financial motivation to lie. We can show Marcus's pattern of abuse. But Madison, I need you to be prepared. This is going to get ugly. The Blackwells have unlimited resources, and they are willing to use them. What do I do, Madison asked, pulling back from Cameron. How do I fight billionaires in my own family? You tell the truth, Rebecca said, over and over. You tell your truth until someone listens. And we build our own case. Cameron, do you have the hospital records? Cameron nodded. Everything. The injuries consistent with a fall, not a jump. The doctor's notes about how she protected her belly instinctively, which people who are trying to hurt themselves do not do. The rape kit and domestic violence screening that showed old bruises. Wait, Madison interrupted. Rape kit? The hospital does them automatically for trauma patients to preserve evidence, Rebecca explained. It is standard procedure, and it might save your life in court. Over the next week, Madison remained in the hospital recovering. Her physical injuries healed slowly, but the emotional wounds grew deeper every day. The media had gotten hold of the story. Social media exploded with speculation. Madison Blackwell trended for 3 days straight. Half the internet believed she had been pushed. The other half believed the Blackwell family's narrative that she was an unstable gold digger. Vanessa gave an exclusive interview to a major news outlet. She sat in a designer dress, tears in her carefully made-up eyes, and spoke about how worried she had been about Madison. Madison has been struggling for months, Vanessa said sadly. Marcus confided in me about it. He tried so hard to help her, but she refused treatment. She was paranoid, accusatory. It was heartbreaking to watch. Madison watched the interview from her hospital bed and felt rage like she had never known. That woman was sleeping with my husband, she said to Cameron, and now she is on television playing the concerned friend. People will see through it, Cameron said, though he did not sound entirely convinced. But people did not see through it, or at least enough people believed Vanessa's performance that the narrative began to shift. Madison went from being a victim to being a question mark. Maybe she was unstable. Maybe the fall had been an accident caused by her own erratic behavior. Maybe the Blackwells were right to seek custody. 1 week after the fall, Madison was finally discharged from the hospital. Cameron brought her to his penthouse in Tribeca. It was beautiful, modern, filled with light. Everything Marcus's cold penthouse was not. "You have the master bedroom," Cameron said, showing her around. "I will take the guest room. No pressure, no expectations. You stay as long as you need." "Thank you," Madison whispered, "for everything." That night, Madison stood in the bathroom looking at herself in the mirror. The bruises had started to fade from purple to yellow. The cut on her forehead was healing. But she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. She had been so sure that surviving the fall meant she had won, that Marcus would go to jail and she would get her life back. She had let herself hope. But hope, Madison was learning, could be a dangerous thing. Because the Blackwells were not just wealthy, they were connected. And they were willing to destroy anyone who stood in their way. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Madison's hand shook as she opened it. "You should have died on the pavement. This is not over. You will lose everything, just like I did. M." Madison felt ice flood her veins. Marcus had found a way to contact her, despite the restraining order. He was threatening her, promising to take her daughter. She showed the text to Cameron. He immediately called the police and his lawyer. But everyone knew it would be difficult to prove Marcus had sent it. He probably used a burner phone. He was careful now. That night, Madison lay in the unfamiliar bed in Cameron's penthouse, one hand on her belly, feeling her daughter kick. She was 29 weeks pregnant now, 11 weeks until her due date, 11 weeks to figure out how to keep her baby safe from the man who had tried to kill them both. "I will not let them take you," Madison whispered to her daughter. "I do not care what I have to do. I will protect you." But even as she made the promise, she wondered if it was one she could keep. Because the Blackwells had shown her something terrifying. They could buy witnesses. They could manipulate the media. They could turn even her own mother against her. How did you fight people who could buy reality itself? Madison did not have an answer. She only knew that she had to try, because the alternative, losing her daughter before she even held her, was unthinkable. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, even though she knew nightmares were waiting. Nightmares where she fell forever and never landed. Where Marcus's hands pushed her over and over again, where her daughter was born and immediately taken away. The false victory had crumbled. The hope had died. And Madison was more alone and afraid than she had ever been. 3 weeks after the fall, Madison sat in a courtroom for the emergency custody hearing. She wore a conservative navy dress that Cameron had helped her pick out, her growing belly evident despite her attempt to look composed and stable. Her hands trembled as she folded them in her lap. Across the courtroom, Marcus sat with his mother Victoria and a team of expensive lawyers. He looked respectable in a charcoal suit, his face arranged in an expression of concerned worry. When his eyes met Madison's, they were cold and triumphant. The judge, an older man named Theodore Hutchins, reviewed the documents before him with a stern expression. The Blackwell family's lawyer, a man named Gregory Patterson, stood to present their case. "Your Honor, we are here today because we are deeply concerned about the welfare of an unborn child. Madison Blackwell has demonstrated a pattern of instability that puts this baby at risk." Over the next hour, Patterson systematically destroyed Madison's character. He brought up her broken engagement to Cameron 3 years ago, painting it as evidence of commitment issues. He referenced the party where she had confronted Vanessa, describing it as erratic and aggressive behavior. He played clips from Vanessa's news interview. Then he called Madison's mother to the stand. Eleanor Hart took the witness stand in a designer suit, looking every inch the concerned parent. She testified that Madison had always been emotionally fragile, that she had struggled with depression as a teenager, that Eleanor had been worried about her daughter's mental state for years. "I love my daughter," Eleanor said, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, "but I have to think about my grandchild's safety. Madison is not in a place to be a mother right now." Madison felt like she was drowning. She wanted to scream. She wanted to stand up and call her mother a liar. But Rebecca had coached her to stay calm, to not give them any ammunition. When it was Rebecca's turn, she called the paramedics who had treated Madison at the scene. They testified that Madison had said Marcus pushed her. They described injuries consistent with being pushed, not jumping. Rebecca called the doctor who had treated Madison in the hospital. He testified about the protective way Madison had curled around her belly during the fall, about her desperate concern for her baby's welfare, about injuries he had seen that suggested prior abuse. She called Cameron to the stand. He testified about Madison's character, about the woman he had known 4 years ago who was confident and successful, about the gradual change he had noticed in her after she married Marcus. But Patterson tore into Cameron on cross-examination. So you have feelings for Mrs. Blackwell, do you not, Mr. Sterling? Cameron hesitated for just a moment. Yes. And you were engaged to her before she married Mr. Blackwell? Yes. So you have a vested interest in painting my client as a villain and Mrs. Blackwell as a victim? I have an interest in the truth, Cameron said firmly. Or perhaps you see an opportunity, Patterson suggested. A vulnerable, pregnant woman. Substantial money from a divorce settlement. A chance to finally have the woman who rejected you 3 years ago. Objection, Rebecca called. Speculation. Sustained, the judge said, but the damage was done. Finally, Madison took the stand. She told her story as clearly and calmly as she could. The emotional abuse, the isolation, the affair with Vanessa, the confrontation on the balcony, the push. Mrs. Blackwell, Patterson said during cross-examination, is it not true that you had been drinking at the party? I had 1 glass of champagne, Madison said, earlier in the evening. Despite being 6 months pregnant? I took 1 sip, Madison corrected, then put it down. Is it not true that multiple witnesses saw you acting erratically? I was upset because my husband's mistress was wearing jewelry he had given her, Madison said. Or perhaps you were experiencing a mental health crisis, Patterson suggested. Perhaps the stress of pregnancy, the hormones, the pressure of living up to the Blackwell family name. Perhaps it all became too much and you lost control. No, Madison said firmly. My husband pushed me off a balcony because I confronted him about his affair. Patterson smiled thinly. We only have your word for that. And frankly, Mrs. Blackwell, your word has not been very reliable, has it? You told Mr. Sterling you did not love him 3 years ago. Were you lying then, or are you lying now? Madison felt tears sting her eyes. I lied then. I did love him. But my father's business was failing, and Marcus offered to save it if I married him. I was trying to protect my family. So you are admitting you are capable of lying when it benefits you, Patterson said. I was 25 years old and being pressured by my entire family, Madison said, her voice breaking. I made a mistake, but I am not lying about Marcus pushing me. The hearing lasted 6 hours. By the end, Madison felt completely hollowed out. The judge promised a decision within 48 hours. Back at Cameron's penthouse, Madison collapsed on the couch. How did I do? She asked Rebecca. You did well, Rebecca said carefully. But Madison, I want you to be prepared. Judge Hutchins is conservative. He has ruled in favor of wealthy families before. And the Blackwells made a strong case. What does that mean? Madison asked, though she already knew. It means there is a real possibility he will grant temporary custody to Victoria Blackwell upon the baby's birth, Rebecca said, with the option for you to earn back custody over time if you complete therapy, parenting classes, and psychiatric evaluation. No, Madison whispered. No, 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 they cannot take her. She is my baby. We will appeal if necessary, Rebecca said. We will fight this all the way. After Rebecca left, Madison sat in stunned silence. Cameron sat beside her, taking her hand. This cannot be happening, Madison said. I survived a murder attempt. I have done everything right. How can they still take my baby? The system is not designed for people like us, Cameron said quietly. It is designed for people like the Blackwells, people with money and power. So what do I do? Madison asked. How do I fight this? Cameron looked at her seriously. We keep going, we keep fighting, and we find evidence they cannot ignore. What evidence? The security footage, Cameron said. The one Marcus tried to delete. The police have it, but they have not released it publicly. If we can get that footage out there, if people see Marcus actually pushing you, it changes everything. Can we do that legally? Madison asked. Not exactly, Cameron admitted. But I know people, tech people, people who believe in justice over red tape. I cannot ask you to risk that for me, Madison said. You are not asking, Cameron said. I am offering. Because Madison, I cannot sit here and watch the Blackwells destroy you. Not again. That night, Madison lay awake, her daughter kicking actively. She placed both hands on her belly and whispered promises she was not sure she could keep. 2 days later, the judge issued his decision. Temporary custody of baby Blackwell upon birth would be granted to Victoria Blackwell pending further psychological evaluation of Madison Hart Blackwell. Madison would be allowed supervised visits. Madison read the decision 3 times before the words fully penetrated. They were taking her baby. Before she even held her daughter, before she even knew the weight of her in her arms, the court was taking her away. She made it to the bathroom before she started vomiting. Cameron found her 20 minutes later, curled on the floor, sobbing so hard she could not breathe. "I cannot do this," she gasped. "Cameron, I cannot live through this." Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe I should have just died on the pavement. "Do not say that," Cameron said fiercely, kneeling beside her. "Do not let them break you. That is what they want." "They already broke me," Madison whispered. "There is nothing left." "Yes, there is," Cameron said. "There is still a woman who survived a 5-story fall, who protected her baby with her own body, who stood up in court and told the truth even when everyone was against her. That woman is still here, and she is going to keep fighting." Madison looked at him with hollow eyes. "How? How do I keep fighting when I have already lost?" "Because the game is not over," Cameron said, "and I am about to change the rules." Cameron spent the next 72 hours barely sleeping. He made calls to contacts he had not spoken to in years. Tech experts, hackers, and people who operated in gray areas of the law. He was careful, paranoid even, using encrypted apps and meeting people in person rather than over traceable lines. Madison watched him work, feeling helpless. She was 7 months pregnant now, her belly huge, her movements slow and awkward. She could not do the things Cameron was doing, could not fly around the city having covert meetings. All she could do was wait and hope. On the 4th day, Cameron came home with a USB drive. He plugged it into his laptop and pulled up the security footage the police had recovered. "I should not have this," he told Madison, "and we definitely should not release it, but we are going to anyway." Madison watched the footage with tears streaming down her face. There she was, 6 weeks ago, standing on the balcony, Marcus approaching, the argument they could not hear but could see in their body language. Marcus grabbing her arm, Madison trying to pull away, Marcus pushing, Madison falling backward over the railing. It was clear, undeniable. Murder, plain as day. "How did you get this?" Madison asked. "A friend of a friend in the police department," Cameron said. "Someone who thinks what the Blackwells are doing is wrong. Someone who is willing to risk their career to see justice done. If we release this," Madison said slowly, "the Blackwells will come after us even harder." "They are already coming after us as hard as they can," Cameron pointed out. "What do we have to lose?" Madison thought about her daughter, about the court order that would rip her baby from her arms the moment she was born, about Victoria Blackwell raising her child, filling her head with lies about her mother. "Release it," Madison said. "Release everything." That night, the footage appeared on social media. Cameron had contacts at major news outlets, tech blogs, and social justice organizations. They released the footage simultaneously across multiple platforms with the caption, "This is what the Blackwells do not want you to see. This is attempted murder." Within an hour, it had 10,000 views. Within 3 hours, 100,000. By morning, it was trending nationwide. The response was immediate and overwhelming. People who had believed the Blackwell narrative suddenly changed their tune. News outlets that had been sympathetic to Marcus and Victoria scrambled to switch sides. Celebrities began weighing in, calling for Marcus's arrest and condemning Victoria's custody grab. The court of public opinion, which had been so easily manipulated by money and lawyers, turned on a daring when presented with video evidence. Marcus's lawyer released a statement claiming the footage was doctored, taken out of context, and illegally obtained. But no one believed him. The footage was too clear. The push was too obvious. Within 48 hours of the leak, the district attorney's office released a statement. They were upgrading charges against Marcus from attempted murder to first-degree attempted murder. They were investigating Victoria Blackwell for witness tampering and obstruction of justice. They were recommending the judge reverse his custody decision. Madison watched it all unfold from Cameron's penthouse, hardly daring to believe it was real. The tide was finally turning. People believed her now. The truth was finally cutting through the lies. Then came the interview request. A major network wanted to interview Madison. Prime time. national audience, a chance to tell her story in her own words without lawyers twisting her statements. Rebecca advised against it. "You do not owe anyone your trauma," she said, "and anything you say can still be used in court." But Madison wanted to do it. She needed people to understand not just what Marcus had done, but why. The years of gradual erosion, the isolation, the way abuse could look perfect from the outside. The interview aired 1 week later. Madison sat across from a respected journalist, her belly huge beneath a simple blue dress, and told everything. She cried when she talked about the push. She showed her remaining bruises. She talked about the baby she was terrified of losing. And then the interviewer asked the question Madison had been waiting for. "What would you say to other women in similar situations?" Madison looked directly into the camera. "I would say that deep down, you know when something is wrong. When you are shrinking yourself to fit someone else's expectations, when you are afraid in your own home, when you are making excuses for violence, even small violence. I would say that leaving is hard. It might be the hardest thing you ever do, but I promise you, there is a version of your life waiting where you are not afraid anymore. And that life, it is worth fighting for." The interview went viral. It was shared millions of times. Support poured in from around the world. Women shared their own stories of abuse and survival. Organizations reached out offering help. 3 days after the interview, Judge Hutchins reversed his custody decision. Temporary custody would remain with Madison Hart Blackwell, pending the outcome of Marcus's criminal trial. Victoria Blackwell's petition was denied. Madison sobbed when Rebecca called with the news. She had her baby back. Her daughter would be born into her arms, not stolen away. Cameron opened champagne, sparkling cider for Madison to celebrate. They sat on the balcony of his penthouse, the city lights twinkling below them, and allowed themselves to feel something they had not felt in weeks. Hope. Real hope this time. Based on actual victory, not false promises. "Marcus is finished," Cameron said. "His company's stock has tanked. Half his board has resigned. Criminal trial starts in 2 months. Even his mother is under investigation. You did it, Madison. You beat them." "We did it," Madison corrected, squeezing his hand. "I could not have survived this without you." "You survived it because you are strong," Cameron said. "I just made sure people paid attention." Madison looked out at the city and felt something settling inside her. Peace. Or at least the beginning of peace. Her baby kicked hard, as if celebrating too. "You hear that?" Madison said to her belly. "You are mine, you are safe, and you are going to be born into love, not fear." That night, for the first time since the fall, Madison slept through without nightmares. She dreamed instead of holding her daughter, of Cameron teaching the baby silly songs, of a life that was finally actually hers. But at 2 in the morning, she woke to the sound of fire alarms blaring through Cameron's building. She sat up in bed, disoriented and frightened. Smoke alarms were going off on multiple floors. Cameron burst into her room. "We need to evacuate, now." He helped Madison out of bed, grabbed her robe, and guided her toward the door. The hallway was filled with confused neighbors, some in pajamas, all heading for the stairs. The elevators were shut down as protocol during fire alarms. "Can you make it down the stairs?" Cameron asked Madison. 8 floors? "I can do it," Madison said, though her huge belly made her uncertain. They joined the stream of residents heading down. Madison held the railing tightly, moving slowly, Cameron supporting her. Other residents moved around them impatiently, but Cameron shot them looks that made them keep their complaints to themselves. By the time they reached the lobby, Madison was exhausted and out of breath. Her back ached, her feet throbbed. But they had made it. Fire trucks were already outside. Firefighters were entering the building. Residents gathered on the sidewalk across the street, wrapped in coats and blankets over their pajamas. "Probably a false alarm," someone muttered. "Happens all the time." But Madison felt uneasy. Something felt wrong. She scanned the crowd, looking for anything out of place. That is when she saw him. Marcus, dressed in a maintenance uniform, standing near an ambulance watching her. When their eyes met, he smiled. A cold, terrible smile. "Cameron," Madison whispered, grabbing his arm. "Marcus is here." Cameron's head snapped around. "Where?" But when Madison looked again, Marcus had disappeared into the crowd. Or had he ever been there? Was she imagining things? Paranoia from stress? Are you sure? Cameron asked, scanning the crowd. Madison faltered. I thought I saw him, but maybe I imagined it. Let me talk to the police, Cameron said, just to be safe. But before Cameron could move, Madison felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. She gasped and doubled over. Madison, Cameron said urgently, what is wrong? I do not know, Madison said. Something feels wrong. Cameron, something is wrong with the baby. Cameron immediately called for the paramedics on scene. They rushed over with a stretcher, taking Madison's vitals, asking her questions. How far along are you? A paramedic asked. 32 weeks, Madison said. Okay, we are taking you to Mercy General right now. Your blood pressure is through the roof. You might be going into early labor. As they loaded Madison into the ambulance, she caught a glimpse of someone in the crowd, someone who looked like Marcus. But then Cameron climbed in beside her and the doors closed and they were moving. Madison gripped Cameron's hand and tried to stay calm. False alarm, she told herself. Stress making her see things. Marcus could not have been there. He was under house arrest pending trial. He could not be there. But even as she repeated it to herself, she could not shake the feeling that the nightmare was not over yet. That victory was slipping through her fingers again. That Marcus had one final card to play. And she was right. The hospital admitted Madison for observation. The contractions turned out to be Braxton Hicks, false labor brought on by stress. The baby was fine. Madison's blood pressure slowly returned to normal. They kept her overnight just to be safe. Cameron stayed with her, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair by her bed, like he had done weeks before. Madison dozed fitfully, unable to shake the image of Marcus's face in the crowd. At 2 in the morning, Madison woke to use the bathroom. Cameron was asleep, his head tilted at an awkward angle. Madison smiled slightly at how uncomfortable he looked, then carefully pushed herself out of bed. Her belly made everything awkward now. Simple tasks took 3 times as long. She waddled to the bathroom and took care of business, then washed her hands and looked at herself in the mirror. 8 weeks until her due date. 8 weeks until she held her daughter. 8 weeks until this nightmare could truly be behind her. Madison turned off the bathroom light and opened the door. Marcus stood in her hospital room. He was wearing a stolen hospital orderly uniform, a badge clipped to the pocket. In one hand, he held a syringe filled with clear liquid. His face was calm, almost peaceful, but his eyes were dead. Madison froze. Her hand flew to her mouth to keep from screaming and waking Cameron. If she screamed, Marcus might panic, might hurt Cameron. She needed to stay calm, needed to think. Hello, Madison, Marcus said softly. Surprised to see me? How did you? Madison whispered, her mind racing. You are under house arrest. You have an ankle monitor. Marcus smiled and lifted his pant leg slightly. The ankle monitor was gone, just raw, bleeding skin where he had cut it off. I had help, he said. Good lawyers who arranged a transport accident. The kind of accident where a prisoner escapes in the confusion. Madison's hand moved protectively to her belly. Marcus, please. Whatever you are planning, do not do this. Think about your daughter. My daughter? Marcus laughed softly. Madison, I never wanted a daughter. I never wanted a child at all. You were supposed to be controllable, quiet, grateful. But you ruined everything. You went to the police. You talked to reporters. You released that footage. You destroyed my reputation, my company, my life. So now I am going to take everything from you. He stepped closer, and Madison backed toward the wall. Cameron was still asleep in the chair, just 10 feet away, completely unaware. Please, Madison whispered. Marcus, I will disappear. I will take the baby and go somewhere you will never find us. I will say I lied about everything. Just please, please do not hurt us. Too late for that, Marcus said. You took everything from me, so I am taking what was mine to begin with. My child. And you? You are going to disappear, permanently this time. He held up the syringe. Insulin, he explained conversationally. A massive dose. For a pregnant woman with no history of diabetes, it will look like a tragic complication. Hypoglycemia, seizures, maternal death. Maybe the baby survives, maybe she doesn't. Either way, you are gone. And whatever happens to the child, it happens in my family, not yours. Madison's mind raced. She could not scream, that might make him stab her immediately. She could not run, she was 8 months pregnant. She could not wake Cameron without alerting Marcus. She only had one option: fight. Marcus took another step closer, raising the syringe. Madison's hand fumbled along the wall, searching for anything she could use as a weapon. Her fingers closed around the call button remote on the wall. She pressed it frantically, over and over, sending alerts to the nurse's station. Marcus lunged forward. Madison threw herself sideways, crashing into the bedside table. The noise woke Cameron instantly. "Madison!" Cameron shouted, jumping to his feet. Marcus spun toward him, syringe raised. Cameron did not hesitate. He grabbed a heavy medical tray and swung it at Marcus's head. Marcus ducked and slashed with the syringe, catching Cameron's arm. Cameron yelled in pain but kept fighting. The two men grappled, crashing into equipment. Madison pulled herself up, her belly making her movements slow and awkward. She grabbed the first thing she could reach, a pair of medical scissors from the tray that had fallen. Marcus had Cameron pinned against the wall, the syringe inches from Cameron's neck. "Do you know what this will do to you?" Marcus snarled. "It will stop your heart in minutes." Madison did not think, did not hesitate. She raised the scissors and drove them into Marcus's shoulder with all the strength she had. Marcus screamed. He released Cameron and spun toward Madison, shock and pain on his face. "That is for my baby," Madison shouted. "You monster!" Blood poured from Marcus's shoulder. He stumbled backward, hitting the door just as three nurses and a security guard burst in. They saw Marcus in his stolen uniform, bleeding, holding a syringe. They saw Madison and Cameron, both injured, both terrified. They saw the situation instantly. The security guard tackled Marcus to the ground. The nurses rushed to Madison and Cameron. Someone called for police and more security. Marcus righted on the floor, screaming, "She stabbed me! She tried to kill me! I was just checking on her and she attacked me." But the syringe had rolled across the floor. A nurse picked it up carefully, saw what it contained, and her face went white. "This is insulin," she said, "a lethal dose. Why would an orderly have this?" "I am not an orderly," Marcus said, then realized his mistake. The police arrived minutes later. They already had alerts out for Marcus's escape from custody. Finding him in Madison's hospital room with a lethal syringe made the situation very clear. They arrested him on the spot. This time, there would be no bail. This time, attempted murder would stick with multiple witnesses and clear premeditation. Madison collapsed into a chair, shaking violently. Cameron sat beside her, holding his injured arm, but more concerned with her. "You stabbed him," Cameron said, awe in his voice. "You actually stabbed him." "I protected my baby," Madison said. "I protected us." "Yes, you did," Cameron said. "You are the strongest person I have ever known." Later that morning, after Madison had been checked over and Cameron's arm had been stitched up, they sat together in her hospital room watching the sunrise. "It is really over this time," Cameron said. "Right? Please tell me it is really over." "It is over," Madison said, and she felt the truth of it settling into her bones. "Marcus is going to prison for a very long time. Victoria is under investigation. My baby is safe. It is finally actually over. What do you want to do now?" Cameron asked. Madison thought about that. She was 8 months pregnant, staying in her ex-fiancé's penthouse with no job and no clear plan for the future. But for the first time in 3 years, she felt free. Truly free. "I want to have this baby," she said. "I want to raise her in peace. I want to rebuild my event planning business. And I want to figure out who I am when I am not afraid anymore." "And us?" Cameron asked carefully. "Is there an us?" Madison looked at him, the man who had never stopped caring, who had saved her life, who had fought for her when no one else would. "I think," she said slowly, "that there could be. Someday, when I have healed, when I have found myself again. I think I would like to try." Cameron smiled and squeezed her hand. "I can wait," he said. "I have waited 3 years. I can wait as long as you need." "Good," Madison said, "because this time I want to do things right. I want to choose you because I love you, not because I need you. And I want to be whole when I do." "Deal," Cameron said. They sat together as the sun rose over Manhattan, and Madison felt something she had not felt in 3 years. Not hope. She had felt hope before and been disappointed. Not relief, though she felt that too. She felt like herself again. Like Madison Claire Hart, the woman who had built a business and fallen in love and dreamed big dreams. The woman who had been buried under 3 years of abuse was finally clawing her way back to the surface, and she was not going to let anyone bury her again. The trial of Marcus Thorne Blackwell became the most watched court case of the year. Media trucks lined the streets outside the courthouse. Protesters held signs both supporting and condemning Marcus, though the supporters dwindled as more evidence emerged. Madison attended every day of the trial, her belly huge at 37 weeks pregnant. She sat in the front row with Cameron beside her, showing the jury and the world that she was not afraid anymore. The prosecution built their case methodically. They showed the security footage of Marcus pushing Madison off the balcony. They presented evidence of the deleted files and Marcus's attempts to cover up his crime. They brought in witnesses who had been at the party and finally told the truth about what they had seen. Then they presented evidence from the hospital attack, the stolen uniform, the lethal dose of insulin, the security footage from the hospital showing Marcus entering Madison's room, Cameron's testimony about the attack, Madison's testimony about Marcus's threats. The defense tried everything. They claimed Madison had provoked Marcus, that she had been having an affair with Cameron and Marcus had simply lost control in a moment of passion. They tried to paint Madison as a gold digger who had trapped Marcus with a pregnancy. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours before returning with their verdict. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder of Madison Hart Blackwell. Attempted murder of an unborn child. Aggravated assault, violation of a restraining order. Escape from custody. The judge sentenced Marcus to 25 years in prison without possibility of parole for 15 years. Victoria Blackwell received 5 years for witness tampering and obstruction of justice. Her reputation in Manhattan high society was destroyed. The Blackwell real estate empire collapsed as investors fled and partners ended contracts. Vanessa Catherine Reed received 3 years for lying to police and helping Marcus construct his false narrative. Her social media was deleted and her career in marketing destroyed. Madison's mother, Eleanor Hart, was not charged criminally, but Madison cut off all contact. Eleanor reached out several times, but Madison never responded. Some betrayals could not be forgiven, and selling your daughter for money was one of them. 1 week after the verdict, Madison went into labor. It was 3 in the morning, and Cameron drove her to the hospital with his hands shaking on the wheel. "You are going to be fine," he kept repeating, though it was unclear whether he was reassuring her or himself. "I know," Madison said between contractions. "I survived Marcus Blackwell. I can survive childbirth." The labor lasted 14 hours. Cameron stayed by her side the entire time, letting her squeeze his hand until his fingers went numb. He whispered encouragement, brought her ice chips, and told her terrible jokes to distract her from the pain. Finally, at 5:37 in the evening, Madison Claire Hart's daughter entered the world. She was 6 pounds, 9 ounces of perfection, tiny fingers and toes, a shock of dark hair, lungs that worked perfectly as she announced her displeasure at being evicted from her comfortable home. The nurse placed the baby on Madison's chest. Madison looked down at her daughter and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. "Hello, Sierra," Madison whispered. "Welcome to the world." She had chosen the name Sierra weeks ago. Sierra meant mountain range, something strong and unshakable. And Cameron was the baby's middle name, though Cameron did not know that yet. Sierra Cameron Hart, not Blackwell. Hart. Madison had legally changed back to her maiden name as soon as the divorce was finalized. Her daughter would carry no connection to the man who had tried to kill them both. Cameron stood beside the bed, tears running down his face as he looked at the tiny baby. "She is perfect," he whispered. "Madison, she is absolutely perfect." "Do you want to hold her?" Madison asked. Cameron looked terrified. "I do not know how." "I will teach you," Madison said with a smile. "We will figure it out together." She carefully transferred Sierra into Cameron's arms, showing him how to support the head. Cameron looked down at the baby with an expression of pure wonder. "Hello, Sierra," he said softly. "I am not your dad. I am just the guy who is going to make sure you and your mom are safe and happy. Is that okay with you?" Sierra yawned hugely, completely unimpressed by the adults fawning over her. "I think that means yes," Madison laughed. Over the next 2 days in the hospital, Madison fell completely in love with her daughter. Sierra was a good baby, easy and calm. She nursed well, slept in reasonable stretches, and seemed content to just exist in her mother's arms. Friends Madison had not heard from in 3 years started reaching out. people who had been pushed away during her marriage with Marcus. They sent flowers and cards and offered help. Madison's father even showed up, though Madison only allowed a brief visit. That relationship would take time to repair, if it could be repaired at all. But the person who was there most was Cameron. He visited morning and night, bringing Madison real food from her favorite restaurants. He held Sierra while Madison showered. He learned to change diapers and swaddle and all the things neither of them had known before. On the third day, as Cameron was leaving for the night, Madison stopped him. "Cameron," she said, "Sierra's full name is Sierra Cameron Hart." Cameron froze. You named her after me?" "Middle name," Madison clarified. "I hope that is okay. You saved us, both of us. It felt right." Cameron's eyes filled with tears. "It is more than okay. It is thank you, Madison." "Thank you," Madison said, "for everything. For never giving up on me, for fighting for us, for being here." "I will always be here," Cameron said, "for as long as you want me." "Good," Madison said, "because Sierra is going to need a lot of people who love her. And I think I am ready to be one of those people who love you. Really love you, not because you saved me, but because you are you." Cameron smiled through his tears. "Can I kiss you?" Madison laughed. "I have not showered in 2 days and I am wearing a hospital gown. Ask me again in a week." "Fair enough," Cameron said. "I will wait." And he did wait. He waited while Madison recovered from childbirth. He waited while she settled into motherhood. He waited while she slowly healed from 3 years of trauma. But 6 months after Sierra was born, Madison invited Cameron over for dinner at her new apartment. It was small, but hers, paid for with a settlement from her divorce and the restart of her event planning business. Cameron arrived with flowers and a stuffed bear for Sierra. Madison wore a simple green dress, her hair down, looking more like herself than she had in years. After they ate and Sierra was asleep in her crib, Madison took Cameron's hand. "I am ready now," she said, "to try this for real. No pressure, no rush, just us, figuring it out together." Cameron cupped her face in his hands. "Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything," Madison said. And when he kissed her, it felt like coming home, like the life she was supposed to have lived was finally beginning. 1 year after the fall, Madison stood on a ground floor patio at her first major event since before her marriage to Marcus. She had rebuilt her event planning business from scratch, and tonight was a Christmas gala for a major charity. 150 guests, similar to Marcus's party, but this time everything was different. This time, Madison was in control. This time, she was the boss. This time, she was not afraid. Sierra was 11 months old now, spending the evening with a trusted babysitter. Madison checked her phone obsessively throughout the night, but the sitter kept sending photos of Sierra happily playing with blocks. The event was a massive success. The charity raised 3 times their goal. Several guests asked for Madison's card for future events. By the end of the night, she had bookings for the next 6 months. As staff cleaned up, Cameron arrived to pick her up. He had started coming to more of her events, not as her security blanket, but as her partner. They had been officially dating for 7 months now, taking it slow, building something real. "How did it go?" Cameron asked, kissing her hello. "Perfectly," Madison said, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "Everything went perfectly." "I never doubted it," Cameron said. "You are brilliant at this." As they drove home, Madison looked out at the city lights and thought about how much had changed in 1 year. Marcus was in prison. Victoria had disappeared from public life. Vanessa was forgotten. And Madison? Madison had built a new life from the ashes of the old one. She had started a foundation called Fell But Flying, providing resources and support for domestic violence survivors. She spoke at events, sharing her story, and encouraging other women to leave dangerous situations. She had become an advocate, turning her trauma into purpose. Her relationship with Cameron was healthy and equal. They had their own spaces, their own careers. They came together by choice, not necessity. Sierra adored Cameron, reaching for him whenever he arrived and crying when he left. But Cameron never tried to replace Marcus as Sierra's father. He was simply Uncle Cameron, the man who loved them both without conditions. Madison had gone to therapy twice a week for months, working through the trauma and learning to trust again. She had nightmares sometimes, still flinched at sudden movements occasionally. But she was healing. Slowly but surely, she was healing. When they arrived home, the babysitter reported that Sierra had been perfect. Madison paid her and tipped extra, then went to Sierra's room. Her daughter was asleep in her crib, one tiny fist near her face, breathing softly. Madison stood there for a long moment, just watching. This perfect little human who had no idea she had survived a murder attempt before she was even born, who would grow up strong and loved and safe. Cameron appeared behind Madison, wrapping his arms around her waist. "She is amazing," he whispered. "Just like her mom. We survived," Madison whispered back. "Against all odds, we survived." "More than survived," Cameron said. "You rebuilt. You thrived. You turned something horrific into strength." Madison turned in his arms to face him. "I could not have done it without you." "Yes, you could have," Cameron said firmly. "You are the strongest person I know, Madison Hart. You always were. I just reminded you of that." Madison kissed him softly. "I love you," she said. "I know we agreed to take things slow, but I need you to know. I love you completely. Fully. In a way I have never loved anyone." "I love you too," Cameron said. "I have loved you since the moment I met you. I loved you when you married Marcus. I loved you when you fell. I loved you when you were broken. And I love you now that you are whole. I will always love you." They stood there in Sierra's room, holding each other, and Madison felt peace settle over her like a warm blanket. This was her family. This was her life. This was what she had fought for. The next morning, Madison woke to Sierra's babbling over the baby monitor. She went to her daughter's room and found Sierra standing in her crib, holding on to the rails, bouncing excitedly. "Mama," Sierra said clearly, one of her first real words. Madison's heart melted. "Good morning, sunshine," she said, picking up her daughter. "Did you sleep well?" Sierra babbled cheerfully and grabbed Madison's hair. They went to the kitchen where Cameron was already making coffee. He had stayed over, something that was happening more frequently, though he still maintained his own place. "Good morning, Hart girls," Cameron said, kissing first Madison, then Sierra on the head. They sat together, eating breakfast. Sierra in her high chair smearing banana all over her face. It was messy and chaotic and absolutely perfect. Madison's phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca, her lawyer. "Final divorce papers processed. All settlements complete. Marcus has signed away all parental rights. You are completely free." Madison showed the text to Cameron. "It is really over now," she said. "No more legal ties, no more court dates, no more Marcus." "How does it feel?" Cameron asked. Madison thought about it. "Like I can finally breathe," she said. "Like I can finally stop looking over my shoulder. Like the future is actually mine now." "So what do you want that future to look like?" Cameron asked. Madison looked at Sierra, then at Cameron. "This," she said simply, "exactly this. My business thriving, my daughter healthy and happy. You here with us. Maybe someday we talk about making this official, but no rush. Right now, I just want to enjoy being free." "I can work with that," Cameron said with a smile. That afternoon, Madison took Sierra to the park. It was a beautiful December day, cold but sunny. Sierra toddled around the playground while Madison kept close watch. Other parents chatted nearby, and for the first time in years, Madison felt comfortable joining their conversations. She was not Marcus Blackwell's wife anymore. She was not a victim. She was Madison Hart, business owner, mother, survivor. She was whole again. As Sierra played, Madison thought about her journey. From the woman who stood on that balcony 1 year ago, terrified and trapped, to the woman who fell 5 stories and survived, to the woman who fought through a legal system designed to protect wealth over truth, to the woman who stabbed her attacker with medical scissors while 8 months pregnant. She had been through hell, but hell had not broken her. It had forged her into something stronger. "People ask if I am scared of balconies now," Madison had told an interviewer recently. "Honestly, I am scared of a lot of things. Heights, trust, and giving my heart away again. But I am more scared of becoming small again, of silencing myself, of forgetting that I am the woman who survived when everyone expected me to die. Marcus tried to end my story on a balcony, but guess what? I am the author now, and my story, it is just beginning." As the sun set over the playground and Sierra ran to her with arms outstretched, Madison picked up her daughter and held her tight. "I did it," she whispered to Sierra. "I protected you. I built us a life, and we are going to be so happy, baby girl. So So happy. Sierra patted Madison's face and said, Mama, which was basically her answer to everything these days. Yes, Madison laughed. Mama, that is me, and I am never going to stop fighting for you. That night, after Sierra was asleep and Cameron had gone home, Madison stood on her ground floor patio, not 5 stories up, just ground level, safe. She looked up at the sky and thought about all the women who had not survived, who had fallen and hit the pavement, who had stayed too long and paid the ultimate price. She thought about the women still trapped, still making excuses, still believing the lies that love should hurt, and she made a promise. To them, to herself, to Sierra. She would keep telling her story, keep fighting for justice, keep helping other women find their way out of the darkness. Because she knew something now that she had not known a year ago. Survival was not just about staying alive. It was about reclaiming your voice, your power, your right to take up space in the world without apology. Madison Claire Hart had fallen 5 stories and lived. But more than that, she had fallen 5 stories and risen higher than ever before. And that was the real happy ending.